What really is the problem with the desi sort of families? I know mostly people think it's just like a cultural thing.
In our region, there are many things that you can do as a guy, as a boy, that your sister may not be able to. You're tired late at night, you get off a flight. If we go and hop into a Yango or a Indrive, go, you put the location, you and I might be comfortable enough to fall asleep because we're just tired. There isn't a single woman I know in Pakistan who would do that, even if she is really exhausted.
Urban youth hai, like Gen Zs, वहाँ भी हमने देखा despite having a lot of information, we still see similar cases. अभी जैसे TikTokers के कुछ वाक़यात हुए.
I think you're talking of Sana Yusuf.
Yeah.
Here again was the unwillingness to understand the notion of consent. To say no to a man can result in death. Now, if you think about that for a moment, it's very shocking.
When we talk about the rights, I feel like the messaging is also a big problem. It's like us versus them.
There is sometimes a sense that unless we do something provocative, people will not stop to listen. If we were to take the Aurat March, for example, if you just had a bunch of women who walked through very peacefully, very obediently, with a very feminine touch, it wouldn't make the news.
Someone from 18 to 25 are listening to this conversation. How to think intentionally, especially as a man?
Our impulse is, as we listen to somebody, our mind automatically begins to think, how am I going to solve this problem? But we forget that maybe that woman isn't asking you to solve the problem. All she wants you to do is listen.
Why there is a man representing UN women in Pakistan?
That's a very good question. It's one that I've given a lot of reflection and
Jamshed, thank you so much for taking the time out. Before I go into your work, what you're doing in UN Women and you're heading UN Women Pakistan, थोड़ा सा मुझे अगर if you take me back to your childhood, where are you from and how did you sort of ended up in UN Women?
Okay, well, Talha, thank you very much. It's a pleasure being on your show. So I'm from Bangladesh. I spent a good deal of my years away from the country. Grew up in a number of different locations in Asia, in US, and I think if I go to my school years, I was in a it was a co-educational school. It was an international school. So of course, I also come from a typical South Asian family. So it's not very dissimilar from what you have in Pakistan. You know, the same sort of, and we're two brothers and one sister, and I'm the eldest. So my mother, of course, it's the, what I would say, the Raja Beta syndrome. You know, you're the eldest, so you get all the goodies. You are treated differently. You're told that you have responsibility. There are expectations, and also growing up, I had my usual guy friends, and this is where you begin to learn about what it is to be a man, what it is to be masculine. Of course, they were like boys and teenagers. You're always preoccupied with, sports and, what does it mean to be tough, going to the gym, working out. I also had, fortunately, I also had many female friends who, frankly, I actually enjoyed spending more time getting to know them. But my mother was very adamant, I think, at the time, saying, ladke ladkiyan dost nahi ho sakte. I never quite understood what she meant by that. But, and of course, when you're in a situation growing up where, and now I'm talking more about my growing up experience and interacting with both boys and girls. And with the boys group, of course, you wanted to be cool. So you wanted to fit in. And as boys do, I think pretty much anywhere in South Asia or everywhere in the world, they would maybe say something inappropriate, make jokes which happen to be disrespectful to girls. And again, to be fitting in, you would go along with it. And to me, that was, I think, the first indication that obviously this is not, that's really not healthy or positive masculinity.
But now, like when you look back at this age and now, because of the globalization and now you've traveled a lot, like a lot of exposure, What really is the problem with the desi sort of families? I know, like, mostly people think it's just like a cultural thing. That's the one answer which we get a lot of times. But what else do you think? What are the bigger sort of, underneath like problems?
I mean, I think when it comes to, I mean, if we talk about boys and men generally in our region, and it gets not unique to this region only, but it's a sense of entitlement, right? It's you're told that you have certain privileges, you have certain entitlements, you are treated very differently, right? So you can stay out late. There are many things that you can do as a guy, as a boy, that your sister may not be able to. The issue is also that a lot of men and boys you speak to, they will say, no, no, we are, we protect women, we fully respect them, we protect them. I think part of the problem is that, you know, you can often be too overprotective, meaning that by being, it may be well-meaning, but you are imposing certain restrictions on the movement and the mobility of the women and girls in your family. I think that is one big problem where it prevents women and girls from really realizing their full potential, because there are so many restrictions. You can't do this, you can't go out there, be careful at night. Oh, I don't think you should go to work because it may be a dangerous place for you. It's reflective of the fact that as men and boys, we often say, and you hear this, you'll often hear men say, oh, Jamshed, I have two daughters and I have a sister, so I'm one of the good guys. And that's a very flawed argument, because it often confuses proximity with principle. What do I mean by this? So if you are to say that because I have a daughter and I have sisters, I therefore respect women. But that logic doesn't always hold, because what you are essentially saying is that women deserve to be respected only if they have a relationship to you. But those outside that orbit is fair game. So this is why I think, and I'm speaking, I give this example because it is also exposes some of the unconscious biases we have, right? All of us, you and I, we all have unconscious biases, even as the UN Women rep. I have to every day, I'm still a South Asian male. When I say something or when I do something, I have to ask myself, does this make sense? When I say this, would I say this in the presence of a man? Or am I only saying it because it happens to be a woman? So it's simply to say that we have to, I'm just making the point that whatever we say and do as men, I think we have to ask ourselves and check what are our biases. And some of these biases are more conscious and some of these are more unconscious. So so the problem really is we have to deal with the issue of entitlement. There's a challenge around not understanding consent. So this is also partly our social conditioning. So watch any Bollywood movie, I guess many of the Pakistani dramas, right? So the storyline will be, sometimes the boy or the man will approach a girl. She will reject those advances. And either the mother or somebody in the family will say, Beta, if you really love her, you will persevere and persist. Which gives us all the message is that, okay, listen, don't take no for an answer. No might mean maybe, no might mean yes. And I think that's another big fundamental stumbling block for men and boys to be able to understand that overcoming or overpowering women in that way is actually a form of weakness. It's not strength. So you're not going to conquer or win her over by being persistent or being, aggressive, right? So I think, but this is some of it. I won't say just culturally. It's also social conditioning to say this is how, and many men and boys I talk to will say, no, if you give up too early, then she will think you're not serious, right? So that's really not the message we want to be sending to adolescents and men. But this is still very much embedded in the way we think.
And in your own personal sort of journey and in your life, what was a moment when you feel like, okay, what or how we have been conditioned was not really, you know, properly done, what I am looking around in the world? Because all of these conversations we have generally seen have started at least like just a decade back. Before that, it was not really, especially in the West as well. People started talking about men, what it mean to be a man, toxic masculinity, and all of it. So, what was the moment in your life when you sort of realized that how we are thinking and approaching all of this is not really a right way?
It's a good question. I mean, I don't think there was a pivotal moment where a light bulb came on my head and I said, aha, you know. I think it was it's a series of things. I think probably for me, I will say I spent much of my career in organizations other than UN Women. So I spent with UNDP and a number of other UN agencies. I worked on environmental issues. I've worked on governance issues. I've worked on anti-corruption issues, human rights. Gender came much later. Now, I learned a lot on the job, to be honest. I mean, I had the basic grounding. I'm the program manager, so you know. But one of the things that for me it was really being able to, one, when you're in this job, you are forced to look at things from a very different lens. My normal lens would be, okay, you just look at it as a guy. Now, you and I would not for a moment think, and these are conversations I've had. So if we go and hop into a Yango or a InDrive, you're tired late at night. You get off a flight, you hop into a Yango, you put the location. You and I might be comfortable enough to fall asleep because we're just tired. There isn't a single woman I know in Pakistan who would do that, even if she is really exhausted. Because in the back of your mind, this notion of safety is paramount. So something I take for granted, and I would say, oh, I was so tired. I think I was saying it in a conversation, oh, you know, I got off a flight. I was so tired, I went to sleep. And they would say, Jamshed, right there, this is privilege. I said, what do you mean? So you fell asleep. I said, so? We can't do that. That's just one example. The other thing is, of course, getting up in the morning. I mean, I just put on this outfit. You put on, I know we don't necessarily process as much. Ki kya pehnenge? Subah utھ ke, you know, how do we look? How are we, you know, what's the appearance like? Is this outfit too revealing? Not? Am I going to go in a van, in a taxi? There is so many layers of thinking and processing going through. Walking at night, is there enough lighting? Is there somebody walking behind me? So the daily rituals that you and I go through and what women go through are so different. So when you ask me, you know, what were the turning points? I think that beginning to understand the gravity and the processing and the amount of stress that an average woman, say in Pakistan or even in my country, Bangladesh or India or South Asia, go through on a daily basis just to get through the day that you and I don't have to think about, I think begins to make you think, wow, that's a lot to process. We know that this is a challenge for most women in terms of their safety, mobility. And this also holds women back from, let's say, applying for a job, staying in a job. We have to deal with sexual harassment on the streets, maybe in the workforce. So, and of course, I think, you know, there is not a single day that goes by that I pick up the paper or on social media and you'll see some very troubling case of violence. It could be something to do with underage marriage. It could be something to do with a case of sexual assault. It could be harassment. It could be, you know, discrimination on the basis of sex. All these things. I think this is what really, for me, was really a turning point in terms of understanding. No, this is a societal issue, and I don't think women alone. They've been doing a phenomenal job fighting for their rights for many years and decades. But I think this is the moment where we need to be much more engaging with men and boys to say, listen, you may not think you're part of the problem. You might think you're one of the good guys. But when you do nothing, And when you just sit and be a bystander, you are equally contributing to that problem. So this is about, having these conversations is about saying, listen, think about all the things you do. Think about the women around you, how you relate to them. How do you encourage them? Are you holding them back? And if you are encouraging them, how are you doing it? Can we be more purposeful, more intentional about making sure women are more prominent in various roles in Pakistani society?
But tell me a little bit, as an example, someone is listening to this conversation and they sort of agree that yes, whatever you are saying is absolutely right. But obviously, they are living in a society where sometimes, as you mentioned, like you do things intentionally. Sometimes you're just like, you don't really know. It's just like your habit, and that's how you see people around you are doing. So, how to think intentionally, especially as a man? Like, what are some of the things, as an example, someone from 18 to 25 are listening to this conversation and they really want to, okay, yes, what you're saying is absolutely right, but how to think intentionally?
I think, if I go back, to me, it's easy to speak to an audience now, reflecting upon my experiences, because I have made mistakes in the course of my adolescent years. As an 18 to 25-year-old, I was nothing like I am today. I've evolved. So I would say that if I could turn back the clock and talk to my 18-year-old self, I would say that I would talk to Jamshed back then and say, listen, when somebody in your group of men is cracking a joke or is annoying or intruding upon the private space of a woman and thinking that that's funny, then I should have intervened. And I should have intervened and said, listen, and in an assertive way, this is not right. She needs her space, leave her alone. Now, it takes a tremendous amount of courage for men in Pakistan, and because you're generally in a group, so you have your tribe.
Whether it's a family, whether
It's a
it's like
family,
friends.
it's your tribe. And we generally like to say, ye hamara mamla nahi, it's somebody else's situation, let's not intrude. And I think this is a problem, because it emboldens those who do this as bullies will continue to do this, because we have to increase the cost for that kind of behavior. So if you see somebody walking around indulging in that behavior, they may not be, it could be your own group, right? So the cost of kind of, if you have a big brother type of figure in your group, and aap unko izzat karte hain, and if he says something that you disagree with fundamentally and is disrespectful, it takes a lot of courage to be able to step out of that comfort zone and say, listen, I respect you, but what just happened was very wrong. Now, you might have that conversation in that moment, but that has costs, because it's a loss of face. In a group, if you try to embarrass him, that will cost you. So what you might choose to do in the moment is to say, make a mental note afterwards and say, listen, this really this upset me because of the following. I have sisters, and I have, I think that it could have been dealt more differently. And that's a conversation that needs to happen. Now, how we do it is another matter, right? The other thing, of course, is that as men, sometimes we think we are being very helpful, but we often make assumptions without asking the woman we're trying to help. So to give you another example, whether it's your sister, your wife, or a friend, if she comes to you and says, Talha, look, I need to talk to you, and she's going on about a problem. Now, as men, our impulse is, as we listen to somebody, our mind automatically begins to think, how am I going to solve this problem? We go into problem-solving mode instantly, but we forget that maybe that woman isn't asking you to solve the problem. All she wants you to do is listen. Listen, process, maybe validate. Maybe she just wants to know that she would have most likely, if she's going through a challenge, she would have most likely thought of a number of possible solutions herself. What she's using you to do is to say, am I overthinking? Am I overreacting? I want you to simply validate. I haven't asked you for a solution. And I have made the mistake myself with my wife on numerous occasions, and I've learned the hard way to say, because my mind automatically goes, Acha, let me solve your problem. And she says, you don't understand. I'm not here for you to solve my problem. Can you just for a moment
Just be a soundboard,
Just be a
essentially.
sounding
Yeah.
board. Don't be judgmental. And this is all I ask of you. Is this too much for you to do? Now, again, many men might get offended to say, "Ye kya baat hui? I'm trying to help you."
ऊपर से आप मुझे, yeah.
And so I think, but it is important for us because again, we process things differently. Now, the intention is a good one, but like here again, it's a man or a boy making the assumption that the person who is speaking to them wants things to be done a certain way. So it is important for us to always be asking, "Acha, what do you need from me? How can I be of support to you?" Sometimes I also hear when I ask women and I say, "Okay, what is the one thing we can do to make your life better?" And usually if it's a woman who is already very qualified, very competent, you know what the answer is? They will say, "Bas piche hat jao." It blows your mind because you're like, "Oh, do you want me to talk about something for you? Do you want me to help open doors for you?" Like, no. I can do all of that. All I'm asking you to do is take a step back. Don't be the obstacle in my way. I think the Malala Yousafzai's father, at one point, he said something very interesting. He said, when people asked him, "It's great. You're a great supporter of Malala. What happened?" He says, "No, I didn't clip her wings. You just let her be." So I think I would say in Pakistan, I've met so many talented women, so much of talent, so much of experience and commitment. And I think the one easy thing that we can all do is to say, "Okay, let's just make a little bit more room." We don't have, it's the baseline for men, unfortunately, is so low that any small thing we do is considered to be a big deal. But I'm not saying that should be the case, but that is how it is,
But do you also think कि ये जो पूरा issue है, obviously we try to solve it when you're adult. Like we are talking to, as an example, I ask you if someone is like watching this conversation and they have age from 15 to 25. But असल तो आपकी जो तरबियत है, आपका जो mindset है, जो पूरा framework आपका बन रहा है, वो बचपन से बन रहा है. एंड और चीज़ों की तरह इसमें भी लाइक वी आर लाइक इन आवर स्कूल्स एंड लाइक जब हम बच्चों को बड़ा कर रहे हैं, माँ बाप जो हैं, दे आर लाइक दिस इज़ नॉट रियली पार्ट ऑफ एनी ऑफ द लर्निंग ऑफ अ चाइल्ड, बिकॉज द बिगेस्ट प्रॉब्लम ओवर हियर विच आपकी बात से भी और वैसे भी अराउंड माई सराउंडिंग जो मुझे समझ आई है कि इट्स जस्ट रियली टू अंडरस्टैंड अदर पर्सन फर्स्ट, बिकॉज आपको लाइक हाउ योर फ्रेंड विल प्रोसेस समथिंग and then your colleague, and then like male, female और उसमें. So इसको ज़रा ये तो बचपन में like वहाँ से नहीं सारा कुछ शुरू होता.
You're absolutely right. I think there are many studies that show that even by the age of 3, boys are already beginning to process information related to inequalities. So if they see inequalities, they will simply mimic and try to they will pick up those habits. So but again, I will say that men and boys are not pre-programmed to indulge in behavior that is discriminatory. This is something that is taught, right? So it's passed on. Hamare maashre mein, in the society, generally speaking, these practices are inculcated at a very early age. So I think maybe I will be too optimistic to think that we are going to already start to train throughout Pakistan all these kids in how to be gender equal at the age of 3, because we're dealing with very remote rural societies as well. But what I am saying is that these learnings can be unlearned. There's a lot of unlearning we need to do, right? So the issue isn't about, and also I think the men and boys and also women, our gender unequal thinking is not dependent on the level of education. Sometimes you hear the thing, "Oh, Falana has got a master's or a PhD," right? When someone doesn't have that. Now, we don't actually see, if I use violence, so the argument would be that, "Acha, if agar aapki tarbiyat achhi hai, if you're educated well, then you're not going to indulge in
sometimes opposite
in gender-based violence."
Yeah.
But that doesn't hold. You can take any socioeconomic group from Pakistan,
True.
and I will give you an example where even in the most elite part of Islamabad, there have been some of the most atrocious cases of gender-based violence, right? So it's not a matter of how much educated are you. I think we have to be very careful when we make that generalization. Ke nahi, the solution to all of this, Jamshed, is education. Okay, to some extent, but what kind of education? So a lot of these things that, I may even be speaking to people who are PhD holders, and they will hold very regressive views on women. So then the conversation is, acha chalo, I cannot change your upbringing when you were 3, 4, 5, 6. All I can do now is to say to you, as I have also changed, is that start beginning to unlearn some of those things you've taken for granted.
Or start thinking very consciously.
Start thinking very consciously. And, I will say also this, that, look, let's be, practical. In many parts of Pakistan, the culture of girls and boys mixing at an early age is also difficult. Because you sometimes have in some locations, not everybody has co-educational schooling systems. So you'll have girls schooled separately, boys schooled separately. And now I'm not going to get into a debate as to what I think, whether co-educational versus girls and boys. But what I will say is that when boys or girls, and boys especially, when they grow up, if you're growing up and you're only interacting with other boys, there will come a time, let's say you leave your high school, and the only time you are interacting with girls is when you're going to college in a large city. So you're coming from a rural area, jahan pe you are only interacting with boys, and suddenly you are in Islamabad or in Lahore, and you're in a classroom with very, very strongly opinionated, strong women. And one, you find that to be challenging, you find that to be somewhat threatening, and you may not know how to even deal with these women. So that social awkwardness is also a point of conflict. Because when you speak to many of these women, they'll be like, these guys, they cannot have a normal conversation. Because we only become individuals with physical attributes, not with intellect. So I think there is some need. Again, personally, this is my personal belief. It's very important that even at a relatively young age, boys and girls should be able to, like you said earlier, if you're not communicating with one another, you're not going to understand their perspectives.
The language, yeah.
And, of course, if you have a sister, you might understand a bit more. But if you're only hanging around boys and a family of only boys, you will not pick up those things. So I think it is, therefore, your question was, yes, you're right. It starts early, but we can't always ensure that children at that age are given the right tools, because we're also depending on their parents, and their parents may come from backgrounds which are very, very conservative, and that is only being repeated, right? So, so there's not much you can do there. But where I am hopeful is, I do feel that there are many, many instances where we can work more on unlearning at that age.
One other thing we have seen कि अभी जैसे we are having this conversation now, there is a lot of information available. पिछले ज़माने में अगर आज से आप 5 साल पहले जाएं, pre sort of social media जब बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं था, तो ठीक है, आपको पता नहीं है, आपको अचानक पता चलता है, आप सब किताबें पढ़ रहे हैं, you're not traveling. Now the world is in your hand. Like आप खोलते हैं, आपको US भी पता चल रहा है, आपको यूरोप भी पता चल रहा है, आपको मिडिल ईस्ट भी पता चल रहा है. And then we've also seen कि बहुत ज़्यादा जो sort of urban youth हैं, जो like Gen Zs and like early 20s में जो लोग हैं, वहाँ भी हमने देखा, despite having a lot of information, a lot of times very conscious education, schooling system they also go, but then we still see similar cases. अभी जैसे टिकटॉकर्स के कुछ वाक़यात हुए, जिनमें एक लड़का था, वो एक टिकटॉकर के पीछे था, एंड जाके घर मार like then, because फिर आर्ग्यूमेंट ये भी है कि अब तो आपको पता भी है, दुनिया भी आपके सामने है, you have exposure as well. So then like where is it driving from? Is it also, जो मुझे लगता है कि it's also because of the law and order situation, कि जितने जो केसेस होते हैं आप देखते हैं कि किसी को कुछ नहीं होता, because हर इंसान ज़ाहिर है परफेक्ट तो बिल्कुल नहीं हो सकता. अब इवन लंदन में आप देख लें, बीच में रॉइड्स आपके हुए, आपके सामने था, इतना पुरअमन मुल्क, और आपने लंदन में रॉइड्स देखे गए, दुकानें लोग लूट रहे हैं, ऑल ऑफ इट. सो डू यू ऑल्सो थिंक कि इसमें कहीं ना कहीं, ठीक है तरबियत वो सारी चीज़ें भी, बट देयर इज़ not having a danda on the sir, कि एक आपका डंडा हो कि आपको पता हो कि अगर मैं ऐसा कुछ करता हूँ, so these are the consequences.
No, absolutely. I think the rule of law is an important consideration. Pakistan, to its credit, actually has a lot of good laws on the books.
But the implementation is
Exactly, implementation, the rate of conviction. Now, the challenge, of course, is the case you mentioned recently with the TikToker. I think you're talking of Sana Yusuf,
Yeah.
and that was again, and there are many examples like that. One of the issues there was that, if I remember correctly, here again was the unwillingness to understand the notion of consent. So here was a man who happened to like this girl. She did not, I don't think it was reciprocal. And the cost of a girl in Pakistan today still to say no to a man can result in death. Now, if you think about that for a moment, it's very shocking. So, and again, why is rejection such a blow to the ego for a male? कि उन्होंने मना कर दिया. Does that mean that she has to pay with her life? So there is something inherently wrong with the fact that, we get rejected from jobs, right? Do we go and kill the employer? No. Why? Because I think there is a power imbalance. It's about power as well. This person knows that this is a younger person, probably doesn't have that ability to fight back, and I can get away with it, right? So, but I think this is the sort of thing that we have to be, I think one, of course, legislation needs to be not just stronger, but the enforcement needs to be much stronger. So I think we do have to certainly work on the side of on the side of enforcement. But also, look, it's tricky, right? Because if I take the example of sexual harassment, now, how many times, if somebody comes past you and touches you inappropriately, ya to CCTV will capture it, and if nobody has seen it, it's almost impossible to prove. So the burden on a woman to be able to prove that is so high. The other thing is, of course, an issue of power dynamics, right? Now, the whole issue that we're talking about, gender, is around power dynamics. If we have more power than somebody else, or entitlement, nobody likes to give up power willingly. Okay? Right now, if my wife tells me, okay, Jamshed, every day after work, when you come home, you'll help me out in the kitchen, I will complain. I will try to get away from it, maybe. But I also understand that sharing responsibilities makes for a much more equal relationship. But हमें वो चीज़ करना नहीं है. हमें बैठना है वो सोफे पे रिमोट लेके. We don't want to get up, because then again, it's this whole social conditioning. Even if you might have women in the house saying, "Oh, beta, why did I get you married if you had to get up and cook your own food?" Even some of these slogans are so, I find it very strange that some of these slogans like "Khana khud garam kar lo" evokes such a visceral reaction. All we're saying is, well, warm your own food. It's okay. But on the media, often I've seen, during the sort of, when we had the Aurat marches, there was a big, they made a big fuss about, oh, we can't be doing this. But it comes back to the fact that for much more healthy relationships for men and women, there has to be that co-responsibility, not just in the professional sphere, but also in the domestic sphere.
But do you also feel like, आपने जैसे औरत मार्च की बात की, when we talk about the rights, one thing which I've noticed, because as a media company and as a, on a personal level, I've worked on both sides, and obviously you have friends on both sides. I feel like the messaging is also a big problem. It's like us versus them. And no one is trying to bring like, okay, there is a problem. Dono sides like know and agree that there is a problem. But in all the panels, whether it's a development sector panel, corporate panel, on Women's Day, yeah, generally like in the messaging as well, I feel like there is like no one is really trying to solve the problem. It's just like, how much hai, so you are doing this, and I like, do you also feel like there is a bit of a problem with the communication or the positioning of the whole, topic?
It's a very interesting point, and I think there is a reason why you sometimes see this adversarial relationship. I mean, gender equality and the pursuit of gender equality should not be a zero-sum game. It isn't as if you win, I lose. I think that's the problem that we have, is that we are pitching it as a win-lose proposition. And when you have that win-lose proposition, then obviously there will be some people who will viciously guard their position and say, "Ji, hum sahi hai, aap galat hai." But I think, when and there are, to be fair, there are and many of these women who are maybe come across as very vocal, as very opinionated, and possibly even aggressive. It's because they're also venting a sort of frustration with the system. So I understand where that comes from. It's them saying repeatedly, "We've been saying this for so long that you guys don't listen. The only way we can get your attention is if we do something provocative." Baat to wahi hai. That there is sometimes a sense that unless we do something provocative, that people will not stop to listen. So if we were to take the Aurat March, for example, and if you just had a bunch of women who walked through very peacefully, very obediently, with a very feminine touch, it wouldn't make the news, right? But if you want to garner that attention, to say, listen to me, listen to my grievances, listen to these issues, then that creates. So I think in the debate, if it gets lively and animated, it's not a bad thing. But it's not as if, and sometimes I will hear this from men. They'll say, "Oh, those women is just man haters." I'm like, no. Let's make a distinction. For the most part, it's not hating men. It's hating that entire patriarchal system, right? And so, versus men sometimes saying, "No, we hate you." And sometimes that becomes very individualized. So I think in many of these debates, to be honest, I think that sometimes we do need some of these adversarial type debating, because it really reveals the spectrum from this end to that end. But what we eventually want is for people to begin to come closer to the center, to say, "Okay, I'm beginning to understand where you're coming from." But I still think that we have a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah.
Right? Because like you said, you have friends on one opposite extreme, and they may be on the other. And we are trying to sort of come to a point where, okay, we need to coexist. So you cannot say, you can no longer, in this day and age, you can no longer say, "Okay, women will not work at all. You will stay home." It's about choices.
Yeah.
Let them make those choices, right? It's a very interesting observation that we should be getting to a stage where we really can talk to one another, respectfully disagree, but not tear each other down. I think that becomes that only fuels the counter narrative.
And also, like, how to be a good listener. Like, what do you think? What are like some of the qualities which you need to have?
Well, I think many of us are many of the men are maybe guilty of this. I also had that. I try very hard is to not interrupt. Don't interrupt. And there is a word for it. I think it's called man-terruption. And when we are, I mean, you will see this. I mean, if you watch talk shows, and I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
I have tried to watch a talk show and try to quantify the amount of airtime that the anchor gives to the various speakers. Invariably, when the woman's making a point, and she's getting to the point where she's maybe saying something which the anchor may disagree with, or the anchor may not let this person finish. I'm not talking about all anchors, but by and large, to the extent that I watch these talk shows, I always watch and I say, "Aha." And I actually look at it from a gender lens. I say every single time it'll almost be like the woman gets cut off, and the woman will be struggling to say, "Neji, please let me finish." So I think the listening is very important. The other thing is also, again, using the same talk shows. How many talk shows have you seen in Pakistan, whether it's on politics, it's on economics, where you actually see a balanced representation of viewpoints? So maybe you will have a talk show in the morning that talks about cooking, or talks about maybe lighter subjects. वहाँ पे आपको ख़वातीन नज़र आएंगी. But if you see a segment on politics, on international economy, on international relations, It's just a
Yeah.
bunch of the same men, and maybe you'll find one woman. Maybe that woman is the anchor. She might be there only because she happens to be, I hate to say it, a pretty face. So they put her there, but she's not one of the experts. So I think the one of the things that we can do is, yes, what is the art of listening is to not interrupt. Secondly, to make sure that we give more women spaces in conversations that matter. Whether it's the Islamabad talks, right, where everyone's attention was, or whatever, we need to be able to find those. Because I can tell you, if you ask me, Jamshed, give me names of women experts on energy, women experts in aviation, we will find them for you. They are there. But we typically think, nahi, is subject mein to khawateen hai nahi. We can only find men. But that's not the case. We have plenty of women here that should be given those spaces to speak.
अभी जो भी ये कॉन्वर्सेशन सुन रहे हैं उनके जहन में आई थिंक एक और प्रॉब्ली क्वेश्चन आएगा कि यू टॉकिंग अबाउट वुमेन राइट्स एंड वुमेन इश्यूज एंड हाउ वी कैन फिक्स इट. So why there is a man representing UN Women Pakistan?
Well, that's a very good question. It's one that I've given a lot of reflection, and many people do ask. So you're not the first one.
But did you ask yourself when you offered the job जब आपको आए?
No, I mean, I look, I will go back in time. When I first joined UN Women, the year was 2013, 2014. I was in New York at the time with UNDP. And at that time, UN Women had a goodwill ambassador by the name of Emma Watson. If you are a Harry Potter fan, then everyone knows who she is. And frankly, I don't watch that many Hollywood movies, but I was curious. So I went to the UN General Assembly to listen to Emma Watson. And one of her seminal speeches in the UN General Assembly was it was a campaign called He for She. He for She. Basically, in a nutshell, she was telling UN women that, and the larger audience, that, look, for centuries, women have been fighting for their rights at the forefront. We have made some tremendous progress, but we have hit a wall. Meaning that the very people who are the stumbling blocks or who are the obstacles from us gaining more freedoms or making more progress are these men. Now, if we continue to only be filling rooms with women, talking to other women, we're not going to get where we want to get. So it was actually an invitation to everybody and to the men in the room to say, look, step up. Step up and be more purposeful in your allyship for gender equality. Un dino, around that time, UN Women Pakistan ka first ek representative ka position opened up. And I was thinking, wow, I just heard this. Let me give it a shot. I must say, I was very skeptical myself. I was fearful. When I told my wife, she looked at me with this very smirk in her face. She's like, you have a lot of work to do, my friend, to get to that position. But when I did get offered, again, I was very scared to be initially. I came to Pakistan and I had some of the same. I don't blame many of the women who would sit in the room and ask that same question to me. And they say to me, and in fact, they were more straightforward. They would say, Jamshed, aap pe aatbar kyun kare? Why should we trust you? You look exactly like all the million of men who have disappointed us. So tell me, how are you going to change things? So I think the issue is that then I had to say, look, please give me some time to be able to win your trust and confidence. Don't judge me by my biology only. And that shouldn't be the determinant. Judge me by the actions and the work that I do. And I think some of these, I'm happy to say that many, many years later, because in between, I left Pakistan, I went to Indonesia to do an assignment, and I've come back. So many of these same people who were some of my biggest critics have become friends, have become allies, and have become great advisors. So, my team is actually predominantly women. There's one here in the room as well, and they keep me grounded. And I obviously work very closely with them and consult them in whatever I do. And it's also that I think as a man, you do bring a slightly different perspective. I often go into rooms where there are men and there are women. And it's very interesting. When the women in the room leave and only men are sitting in the room, the conversation changes. Because I've had instances, and I will not say which department of the government and which province, but I have been in situations where once my team would leave the room, woman, the men around the table would say, Kazi साहब, अच्छा ठीक है, ये सब तो ठीक है, लेकिन हमें बताइए अगर हमारी ख़वातीन काम करना शुरू कर देंगे तो हम क्या करेंगे?
Like actually,
Actually happens after 2 hours, very successful conversations. They would then, after the women leave the room, they would open up. At that point, it dawns on me, my goodness, Jamshed, abhi bahut kaam baki hai. You know, so it's also we have to understand that as much as we try to make these changes and have these conversations, it's a very different conversation when you have it man to man.
अगेन एक आम बंदे को अगर आप समझाएं, क्योंकि अक्सर लोग जब यूएन का जिक्र सुनते हैं, एनजीओज़ का जिक्र सुनते हैं, वो यूएन को भी एक एनजीओ समझते हैं. बहुत से लोग ज़ाहिर है पीपल डोंट रियली अंडरस्टैंड द होल डेव सेक्टर एंड हाउ दे ऑपरेट, एंड पीपल आर ट्राइंग टू अंडरस्टैंड कि अच्छा ये लोग आके चाहते क्या हैं. ये पाकिस्तान में एक बाहर का इदारा है, वो पाकिस्तान में आके काम कर रहा है. तो अगर आप थोड़ा सा बताएं कि लाइक what are you guys trying to achieve as UN Women Pakistan? Like, what is the goal and objective?
Okay, so we are part of the UN system. We are part of the UN family now. What is the UN? It is owned by member states. Pakistan is a member of the UN, so we are not here parachuting in to try to promote an agenda which is externally induced. The government of Pakistan has signed up to a number of international treaties and conventions, including the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which is called CEDAW. So UN Women's role is basically at the invitation of the government to say, we are here to support the government of Pakistan to fulfill the commitments, obligations that they themselves have agreed to, right? So it's important to stress this because it isn't as if we are coming with a particular donor-funded agenda to do X, Y, and Z, which the government itself is not willing to do. So let's give you an example with child marriage, right? Sindh was the first province that passed this legislation back in 2013. Many years passed, many years. It's only in the past couple of years that we've seen such traction with ICT capital region passing a bill, followed by Balochistan, then Punjab passed the ordinance. So that's a phenomenal progress in a very short span of time. Ab dekhen na, 2013 ke baad kuch nahi hua tha on child marriages, right? Halake Pakistan has signed up, is committed to this. So as we speak, Punjab still has to pass this legislation in the assembly, right? There's an ordinance, but it has to go through the assembly. Who is left? Now we have KP. Right? So this is province by province, but now so what we are doing is we are providing some technical support, some comparative studies on which other countries have done this, including Islamic countries. But this isn't our decision. It's ultimately the government's decision, right? So, and this is not an agenda which is inconsistent with either the culture or even the social norms. And even in Pakistan, we can it's very much aligned with the majority of all the rules and procedures. So there will always be dissenting voices. So and we've been here since 2007. We were here even before 2007, but we used to be called it was still called UNIFEM. It was a different program. But UN Women is still a very relatively new agency. It is the agency that is primarily focused on supporting gender equality and women's empowerment. You have UNICEF that works on children. You have UNHCR on refugees. So at one point in 2010, the UN General Assembly said, well, where is that one agency that speaks about half the population, women and children, women and girls. So that's where UN Women came in the picture. But we are not an NGO. We are part of the UN family, and Pakistan is very much a member. And quite frankly, I think the work is so important in Pakistan because if you look at the global gender gap index, Pakistan is sadly one of the countries that is at the lowest end of the scoring globally. So I think even the government realizes that we have a lot of work to do. It's not a criticism. It is simply saying that UN Women's role and many organizations that support us are very important in ensuring Pakistan is able to move ahead on the gender equality agenda.
Lastly, मुझे बताएं कि we have seen a lot of campaigns by UN Women. आपकी टीम के साथ हमने कुछ काम भी किया. They're doing like amazing work. Last year, उससे पहले भी, and recently एक campaign आप लोगों ने की, ये मर्दानगी नहीं कमज़ोरी है. अब उसके ऊपर I think कुछ criticism भी था, कुछ उसके ऊपर obviously people really appreciate. थोड़ा सा if you can tell our audience like what was the like main aim of the campaign?
Yeah, I was telling you earlier that sometimes when you try to send messages out, people don't tend to listen to you if the message is the conventional one. तो आपको थोड़ा सा हट के सोचना पड़ता है.
So you decided to pinch.
Well, it is like I said, people pay attention to provocative messages. The very fact that I'm having this conversation with you about this, you probably wouldn't have asked me if I just ran a normal message about saying, gee, tashaddud is a bad thing, right? Well, we've said that. You've heard that multiple times. This is something that people will say, okay, what is going on? So at the very beginning of this clip, you will see there is a disclaimer. I understand the sensitivities, and we're also not mocking a medical condition which we know exists, and it's a serious one. We understand, but it is simply to play on the term. You see this. You will see if you see the video. You will see that everywhere people are concerned about Mardana Kamzori. Using the word Kamzori. So we basically use that terminology to try and make a parallel between that and saying, okay, what is toxic masculinity? What is actually weakness? Is weakness defined by a physical attribute, by impotence, or is weakness? And we're arguing that weakness is actually when you are so insecure that you feel the need to strike a woman, right? Because that is an insecurity coming up. That's not strength, because we think of masculinity to be, we're tough. Let's show her place, And there is one particular part in that whole clip where this I think it's a rickshaw puller who says, "Control to karna padta hai na." It's a very sort of it gives you a sense as to what do men think being tough feels like and looks like. So we basically switched that around and said, no, actually the real weakness is the inability to be caring, to be respectful, to confront your insecurities, and to be vulnerable, right? So I think that got a lot of views and got a lot of conversation going on to say, what is the connection here? But it is basically saying, no, that's not Kamzori, and actually saying that, look, you shouldn't be shy or embarrassed about that. What you should be embarrassed and shy and really upset about is if you're striking a woman. We want to stigmatize that. We want to put the stigma on somebody who is a serial abuser, not the person who has a genuine medical condition. So I think that was the attempt to try and say, I don't know how many people got the message. There were some people who got very upset. And those are usually the same, maybe it's the same people who are also perpetrators of violence. Yeah. But this is the sort of thing that I think, for one of the other things that UN Women tries to do, because, we're not a very large organization in terms of people. But what I really believe is that we need to be using platforms such as this and media in a very creative way to strike conversations. I don't want everyone to agree. I'm happy if they disagree, but they need to talk. कि ये चर्चा तो हो कम से कम online. So that was the intent.
Lastly, what would be your advice to young boys like 15 to let's say 24?
I would say to them that be very conscious of your privilege. Understand that there are things that you can do that many of your peers who are women cannot do or are not allowed to do. So try and in any time that you say or do something, in your deeds and words, always ask yourself, would I be saying the same thing in the presence of a boy or a man? Would I make the same comment? You know, we often see on TV, for example, a very famous tennis player or sports person, and it's a woman. And the journalist will ask, so, madam, tell me, how do you manage your professional life with your personal life? Would anybody ask Roger Federer this question? Or a football player, or Messi? How do you manage your football and your home life? We don't do that. So it's simply to say, be very conscious of the privilege that you have, understand that, and also, whenever possible, create spaces for women and girls in your immediate environment, and understand that giving up some of that entitlement and privilege is not a loss to you personally. It's not about them winning and I'm losing. It's really about sharing the responsibility and being accountable for your actions.
Jamshed, thank you so much for taking the time out. It's lovely talking to you.
It was wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thank you.